votes come in at once, all for Joe Biden. That's like flipping a coin 186,000 times and it lands on heads every time. That does not happen. There is no reasonable explanation for the upshoots, the straight lines up. I'm not even talking about an angle. I'm talking about some massive straight lines up in the vote tallies in the middle of the night after they've supposedly stopped counting. And that's when the Dominion operators went in and injected votes and changed the whole system. And it affects votes around the country, around the world, and all kinds of massive interests of globalist dictators, corporations, you name it. Everybody's against us except President Trump and we the people of the United States of America.
You've spoken of unleashing the Kraken. Is the country ready for this? I mean, Americans should be astonished at what you're saying here today. Is the country on the verge of an electoral breakdown?
We've already had it. We have already had that electoral breakdown. But the Constitution, as Jenna explains, has provisions in it for how you fix this. And there should never be another election conducted in this country, I don't care if it's for local dog catcher, using a Dominion machine and Smartmatic software. We've got to have an American company that uses paper ballots that we can all verify so every one of us can see that our vote is our vote.
Why are you not requesting recounts in Wisconsin counties that use Dominion software? You're requesting recounts in 2 counties that don't use the software at all.
Because this case is not only about, remember, this case didn't begin with Dominion. This case began, and this case can be proven the old-fashioned way. It can be proven based on just good old-fashioned democratic tactics that go back to Mayor Daley in the 1960s, when he held the vote back in Chicago so that he could elect John F. Kennedy. Or as recently as last year, when they held the vote back in Palm Beach County and Broward County in order to see if they could steal that election for the Senate and governor, and then got caught manufacturing ballots. Democrats have been doing this for years on a small scale. When they passed the mail-in voter statute, which all of a sudden multiplied by 10 times the number of mail-in votes, they realized they could have a field day. They could do precisely what Jimmy Carter and Secretary Baker warned us about. All you have to do is own an election board, and you can get away with it. And unlike what Sydney is talking about, where you can have a paper trail, a paper ballot, I tried to point out to you, the minute that you separate the outer envelope from the ballot, you can no longer trace it, which is why the count, whatever the count in Georgia today is, it's totally ridiculous. They're counting the same fraudulent ballots one more time. And we're still very close.
Mr. Mayor, so far, no single court has found evidence of fraud. That's got to be disappointing for you and the President. How would you describe his mood at the moment? And do you and him still genuinely believe you can overturn this election, or is it about something bigger for you?
Well, it is about something. Let's go from the big picture to the smaller picture. The most important thing here is that this has been a massive attack on the integrity of the voting system in the greatest democracy on earth. The people who did this have committed one of the worst crimes that I've ever seen or observed. One of the things we're the most proud of in this country is that we've been such a long-standing democracy based on the right to vote. They have trashed the right to vote. They've dishonored the right to vote. They've destroyed the right to vote in their greed for power and money. And there's no doubt about it. This was not an individual idea of 10 or 12 Democrat bosses. This is a plan. You would have to be a fool not to realize that. They do the same thing in exactly the same way in 10 big Democrat-controlled, in most cases, crooked city. And when I say crooked city, go look at how many of their officials have gone to jail in the last 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years that they have dominated and destroyed those cities. They picked the places where they could get away with it. They picked the places where, whether or not Republicans testified to something, judges would just dismiss it because judges are appointed politically. And too many of them are hacks. They picked places where they could get a sheriff that refused to enforce a court order. when we got a court order that we could be 10 feet closer, our representatives were told, if you try to do it, I'll arrest you.
You're painting a portrait of a national conspiracy, suggesting that Joe Biden was actually part of that.
Part one, it began as a national conspiracy. Clearly, that evidence emerged very, very quickly. The minute I saw that it was the same thing in 10 states, just using logic, I said this can't be an accident. And then what I was surprised about is the dimension of it. I mean, not inspecting almost 700,000 ballots is astounding.
If you're suggesting that Joe Biden was part of that conspiracy, I just wonder what your evidence is.
Honestly, I don't know what Joe Biden is aware of or not aware of. And I mean that as a lawyer, not trying to be cute. I've watched him, I've observed him. I honestly don't know how much he's aware. I don't know how much he decides and how much things are decided for him. So
Let me address one other thing to your question about the process. Your question is fundamentally flawed when you're asking where is the evidence. You clearly don't understand the legal process. What we have asked for in the court is to not have the certification of false results. And so to say, hold on a minute, we have evidence that we will present to the court. We haven't had the opportunity yet to present that to the court. We're giving you an overview and a preview of what we've discovered, but no court yet has we've had that opportunity. So when we have we have fraud allegations pending. So what we've asked for are temporary restraining orders or injunctions to not certify false results. We're very happy that Michigan, the reason we dismissed that lawsuit today is because the Michigan county in Wayne County, they're not going to certify that because 71% of counties have inconsistent data. No person in this room or in this country should want states to rush through and coronate a president with false results. We have to make sure that the results are accurate. That's what we will prove.
two more questions.
The Secretary of State says that can't actually happen, that those votes can't be rescinded, and that the certification in Michigan currently stands.
Secretary of State where?
In Michigan.
Yeah, well, there are problems in Michigan. Follow the money.
Follow the political party, ma'am. I mean, you're actually seriously going to want me to take seriously the Secretary of State of Michigan? When the Secretary of State of Michigan never bothered to find out that the votes in her state were being counted in Germany by a Venezuelan company, and you want me to take her seriously or him seriously? I mean, I was in government. If I were the governor of that state, I'd fire everybody that was involved in this election. They didn't come and tell me that my state was going to be embarrassed, made a fool of, because I'm sending my votes of people in Michigan over to Germany to be counted by a company that is owned by people who are allies of Maduro and Chavez. By the way, Carolyn Maloney, who wrote that, is my congresswoman. A Democrat pointed that out. They didn't do the darndest bit of due diligence. If you bought a $10 million company, you would have done more due diligence of that. Maybe they're incompetent, or maybe they didn't want to know. But you're not going to have me take seriously anything that comes from anyone involved in the election the way it was conducted in Michigan.
But you guys are saying that those votes have been rescinded. They haven't. The Secretary of State there says that they can't be.
The Secretary of State can say whatever she wants to say. Of course she's going to say that. She's a Democrat. She could also credit the affidavits of the two people and say that the board is tied and therefore the vote hasn't been certified. So because she's a Democrat, she's saying that. Do you think she has any credibility, having run the kind of election they ran in Michigan? You think anyone in that government has credibility after using a machine and fooling their citizens? There can't be a person in Michigan who thought their vote was being sent outside the United States so somebody could play with it. I mean, it's disgraceful what the government of Michigan did to its citizens. Absolutely disgraceful.
Mr. Mayor?
Last question.
Mr. Mayor, you have just to go back to the servers, are you going to be able to get your hands on the voting machines or the servers, and are you going to be able to see what, when, where, and how?
We're not, we are limited in what we can do. We're not the FBI. We're not the government. We don't have that kind of subpoena power. We don't have the power to just go subpoena anything we want. The government does. we would have to subpoena it in line with a case. Our first case, we're asking for that authority in Pennsylvania and in Michigan. But you have to get that authority from the court. We're private citizens. We're not the government. If I were the government, like I used to be, there'd probably be a lot of people arrested by now. Because there's plenty of probable cause. Plenty of probable cause.
Thank you, everybody.
No. We'll take.
You alleged that Donald Trump has won by a landslide. We've seen that a lot of your lawsuits and in fact lawyers have been kind of dropping like flies. What do you say to those people who call this a Russiagate 2.0 just on the other side? Why didn't this, and also why didn't this happen?
What fake network do you come from?
I don't come from a fake network. In fact, I am completely independent, have no one above my head.
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, our cases haven't been dismissed. We only have.
Over 20
Look at the plaintiffs who were involved in this.
It's not our case, ma'am.
many lawyers.
Don't lie to people.
I'm saying, what do you say to
Ma'am, you are lying.
I think that we
You're
can-
lying.
that,
You're lying.
have
Well, continue to lie. I'm not going
kind of went way over their head.
Ma'am,
pointing back
ma'am,
to Russia,
ma'am,
everything.
ma'am,
What do you say to
ma'am,
those who told
ma'am.
this?
Okay. Let me answer the question.
Same sort of-
Let me answer the question. The answer to the question is we don't have a lot of lawsuits. We only have 3. Our lawsuits have not been dropped all over the place. We
to go away because they were afraid.
Okay, well, you're a totally discourteous person. I'm going to finish my answer. So,
I'm actually really nice.
I'm going to finish my answer. The fact is we have very, very few lawsuits. The lawsuits you're talking about have been brought by private individuals and groups. Most of them were dismissed for lack of standing, probably correctly, because they were brought before the election took place. The election is now over. The only lawsuit we have withdrawn is the one where we got the relief that we wanted, and that's the one in Michigan. We also have another lawsuit in Michigan that will accomplish the other objectives of what we want to do in Michigan. So it's silly to have 2 competing lawsuits. The only lawyer that left a case left because he was threatened. His family was threatened. His children were threatened. And so was the other lawyer. Yeah, that's true. We have a little difficulty getting lawyers because our lawyers get threatened with being killed because of the ridiculous way in which you cover this and the ridiculous way in which you cover.
You haven't seen how I've covered this. Now, what
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about everybody, but I get a pretty good sense from the way you handle yourself, how you cover it. All right, we're finished with you now. One last question. One last question from a, one last question. One last question. One last question from a reasonable civil person. Yeah, you are not. Yes.
I'm not a reasonable person?
No, her, she isn't. Well, we'll find out.
I'm from the Daily Caller, for the record.
Oh, there we go.
If the
Great.
courts don't let you present these cases like Jenna just said, will you give the entire bulk of the evidence to the media to review? And if so, when? Or are you going to drag this thing out like the Hunter Biden hard drive again?
We're not going to drag it out. I mean, it's ridiculous for you to say we're dragging it out. Al Gore had a lot more time than we've had, and we've had 2 weeks to investigate. So that's also completely unfair to say we're dragging it out. Also, if we're going to present things in court, if we present it to you, judges are not going to be very happy with us. And finally, I have to tell you, our witnesses don't want to be exposed to the tender mercies of a vicious press. I have great difficulty getting those witnesses that I did reveal to allow me to do it. They don't trust you. They don't like you. They think you put their lives in jeopardy with the spin that you put on what's going on here and with the unfairness in which you cover it. It's not easy to reveal the things that they tell me.
So the answer is no.
The answer is I can't do it because I can't put a witness's life in jeopardy or a person who thinks their life in jeopardy. This woman tells me we have lawyers dropping out of the case. We have lawyers dropping out of the case because they're being threatened with destruction of their careers, destruction of their livelihood, and in some cases, destruction of their lives. That comes about because of the hysterical way in which you have covered Donald Trump and his administration. But we're going to change all that. We're going to go to courts. We're going to prove it in court. I would love to release all the information that I have. I would love to give it to you all. Except most of you wouldn't cover it. A few of you would. And then we'd have half the American people probably informed. The censorship that is going on in this country right now by big